What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic Nick, and I have yet another album review for you. So another one that came out on the week of the 2nd of June that I was admittedly curious about, namely because a certain member was in it, was the debut album from Dieth, To Hell and Back. Again, this comes out on the 2nd of June on Napalm Records. This band formed in 2022, and this is an international act, and I guess to an extent, a supergroup because every member here is involved in different projects. Or at least were in terms of the more notable acts that I associate these guys with. On guitars, we have Guilherme Miranda, formerly of Entombed AD. On drums, we have Michael Lisichko, formerly of Decapitated. And the big one here, Dave Ellefson, formerly of Megadeth. So this is his first project since he was ejected from Megadeth after his little scandal in terms of a video out there. Yeah, there was a lot of buzz about that one, a lot of memes, a lot of bass slapping jokes. I'm gonna do my best not to make that many. But yeah, that was a pretty big thing that happened in the Megadeth camp, and we're still making jokes about it. Now, David's had a multitude of different projects, as do all the other members, but this is the first one that has kind of gained some traction since the whole Megadeth thing. And admittedly, I was curious because this was billed as a death thrash act. And legit, it's the heaviest thing that Dave Ellefson has ever been involved in. Like, you know, I love Megadeth. I've been listening to Megadeth for years, and Megadeth is definitely a heavy band. But, you know, thrash heavy is different than death metal heavy, and death thrash, I mean, it's kind of a good meeting point between the two. But at the same time, there's music here that I would never associate with Dave Ellefson. But death thrash is pretty much how it was described. And listening to this album, it's a bit more than that. And we have like some collisions of styles here. At its core, I would say death thrash is accurate. You have, you know, fast-paced songs, riffs that kind of belong in both camps, like, you know, the heavy death metal chugging, but some like good thrashy machine gun riffs. You have tons of breakdowns on here, lots of scorching lead work. Miranda really does a fucking killer job in terms of leads and riffs and melodies on here. And the drum work is pretty solid too, like very aggressive. The songs are generally propelled by, you know, big pummeling grooves, lots of double bass work, and the occasional blast we don't hear, but most of the time it is a fast, thrashy rhythm when they decide to go in that gear. Namely on songs like Wicked Disdain or Dead Inside, or The Mark of Cain, which I think is probably the most aggressive number on here. Like, that one kind of takes more from the death metal camp. It's probably the most energetic, bombastic, just aggro song on here. But that song and Wicked Disdain in particular do a really good job of balancing out death metal and thrash metal. You know, you have like the two different kinds of aggression there. And those were pretty solid songs, admittedly. And I say admittedly because the rest of this album is kind of uneven, and I kind of wonder if this was just Miranda and Lisichko's project, and then Dave Ellefson joined and, you know, added his influence to it, which, I mean, to note, Dave Ellefson is 20 plus years older than the other two members, and that isn't a dig like saying, oh, he's too old for like death metal and any of that shit. It's saying that he has different influences that he brings to the table that may or may not actually work in terms of, you know, a flat-out death thrash sound. We know that thrash metal is definitely his pedigree. I mean, that's a thing that he is noted for, but he has a lot of heavy metal influence. And I mean, in terms of the bands that he was influenced by in Megadeth, I think a lot of that comes out here. And I know he has his own solo project where it's sort of a thrash, speed metal, heavy metal sort of thing that he does. I have never actually listened to Ellefson, the band itself, because generally when I think of Dave Ellefson, I think of Megadeth. And maybe the occasional masturbation joke now. But it's his older influence that comes out in certain songs that really makes this kind of odd. Now, it starts pretty well with the title track on here, albeit I think the clean lead-in, while it is kind of long-winded. Like, it almost takes up half of the song before it, you know, explodes into death thrash, very abruptly too. And there are some really weird transitions across the board that I'll get into here. But it's a good pace setter for at least what you think you're going to get on here. But that goes into the admittedly kind of cringy, don't get mad, get even, which just sounds really dated. Like, these are like 90s tough guy lyrics, and the song is really repetitive. it kind of lays on this gang vocal chorus. The entire time I was listening to this track, I was just thinking of like, man, as an edgy teenager in the 90s, I probably would have thought this was some sort of anthem about like getting back at people. And in a way it is, but man, it is not well done. Like, it's just sort of an aesthetic that hasn't aged very well. And it's not even remotely clever or subtle. It's just kind of repeating the chorus. And yeah, it's just sort of a dumb song. And I think the vocals are kind of a little basic on here. They're just sort of a flat growl, like, you know, almost kind of a croak to a degree. They occasionally layer them and add gang vocals. That doesn't really do much to help them. Like, mostly this is more centered on the riffs and the aggression when it shows up. But what does show up is, again, what I was alluding to, a collision of styles. And that really starts on Free Us All. Free Us All is an odd, disjointed song, and kind of where this album takes a bit of a dive. You open up with this almost funky, Sabbathy bass line, and it's an isolated bass because they want to remind you that, hey, we have Dave Ellefson in the band, and we're like, yeah, we know he's a solid bassist, but this bass line does not feel as though it belongs on this album at any point. Now, granted, that does transition into some like triplet chug, double time grooves, very aggressive, like, you know, definitely one of the heavier moments on this album, but it's the returning to this weird bass line and sort of like building kind of like Sabbathy, almost kind of proggy fucking feel to it. And while I think both are executed well, they don't like interlock very well. In fact, they feel like two different bands sort of, you know, writing two different sections of a song and kind of putting it together, and it doesn't work. This is also where Dave Ellefson's clean vocals start popping up. And it's more of a spoken word here, but I'll be honest, he kind of sounds like, you know, Dave Mustaine, maybe minus all the vocal damage over the years. It's very similar, and I can see why Dave Ellefson managed to harmonize so well with Dave Mustaine all those years. But here it feels kind of forced, like they just wanted to have like a part in there where we can just throw in Dave's vocals and see if it worked, and I don't think it did. And this wasn't the only time they did it, because this kind of starts a run of songs in here that I don't think were necessarily meant for this album. I feel like these were Dave Ellefson's songs, and they kind of just worked on them to make them a little bit heavier. Well, all right, that's not even necessarily true, because there's a power ballad on here. Walk With Me Forever. It actually came out as a single, and there's a black and white video of it, and this is entirely Dave Ellefson on vocals, and it's not great. It's kind of like a dollar store version of November Rain, and it is the oddest track on here because it doesn't fit at all. This feels like it was meant for a Dave Ellefson solo project because it is so far removed from, well, everything on here. The guitar melodies are pretty, and, you know, there's a really scorching lead on it, but it's just sort of there. Like, it kind of sticks out like a sore thumb, and as far as power ballads go, I guess it's okay. You know, if this was, again, like more of a straightforward heavy metal project or something like that, yeah, it might fit better, but this is not that. And honestly, I was still adjusting to the track before it, Heavy as the Crown, which sounds like Megadeth covering Crowbar. It's notably more of like a, you know, Sabbathy, sludgy song. It's kind of got like a bouncy groove to it. It even has a faster D-beat section, which instantly reminds me of Crowbar. Hell, even the vocals, when they sort of blend Miranda and Ellefson's vocals, it almost sounds like Kirk singing. And these songs that I'm bringing up, plus the last instrumental, Severance, which is a nice instrumental. Looking at it, I saw it was the shortest track on the album. I figured they were going to close on a fucking violent, you know, thrashy barn burner. But what I got was like kind of a clean, proggy instrumental with some really pretty melodies, but it kind of feels like a half-finished song. And that is sort of an issue on here. A lot of these songs feel kind of half-baked. When they're heavy and aggressive, they're pretty good, but at the same time, they feel a little bit generic. Like, you know, this is very much along the lines of like The Haunted and Hate Sphere, Both bands I really like, but this isn't done quite to their level. And that's the songs that I would call flat out death thrash. The rest of this album is just kind of all over the place. And, well, all right, for a debut album, this album kind of lacks an identity. With a debut album, I feel like you want to establish your brand. And this feels like you're establishing like 8 different brands. And, you know, in terms of a follow-up, like, I mean, I would assume it'd probably be more death thrash, but I don't know. I really don't know because, again, Dave's influences are clearly a lot different than the other members. And again, that's not a knock on Dave's influences. I like a lot of Dave's influences, but I think those are better suited for a different project. I think this album kind of lacks like uniformity, especially around the middle. Like it kind of gets so off the rails that it really kind of struggles to get back on the rails. And by the time it does get back on the rails, you're like, I don't know if I want to hang on this train. I kind of just want to get off at the next stop. So overall, I'm going to give this 2 stars. This was a pretty clunky listen, and even when it was good, I feel like I've heard stuff like this done by bands that really know how to do it. There's nothing overtly wrong with like their more straightforward death thrash side. It's just kind of generic and a little bit dated. Like this sounds like it could have come out in like the mid 2000s. And honestly, back then I probably would have loved it. But it's the stuff that kind of goes off the rails. It just kind of loses focus. It loses direction, and it becomes 2 different projects on the same album. And for a debut album, I think you need to be a little bit more direct, like more straightforward, like, hey, this is our sound, this is what we do. And we could experiment further with the next release, but you really got to like just kind of stick it on that first one. And this one, it's sort of an uneven, kind of clunky mess. I will even go as far as to say I think Dave Ellefson is kind of out of his element here. A lot of this I would not say is his main comfort zone, at least as far as I know. Like, I haven't heard him ever do anything like really extreme before. And the songs that I think he was more involved in the writing on are very apparent on here. And I think maybe those songs were kind of done as like a compromise. Like, let's see if we can take Dave's old school sound and sort of mix it up in this, you know, more death thrash sound and see what we get. And honestly, you got some really uneven stuff. And point blank, a power ballad does not belong on a death thrash album. I just think that's really out of place. But again, I urge you to check it out, form your own opinions. I mean, if you like bands like Hatesphere and Haunted, maybe a little bit of Vader, it has some similar qualities to that. That is at least the bulk of it, or like 3/4 of it. Either way, check it out. Who knows? You might really dig it. So, if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up, and if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there, there's a link down below to thrallsmetal.com. Our Patreon link is down there, as well as our store, which we will be loading up on stuff, and we will definitely notify you guys when we have some new shirt designs. We also have a giveaway going on for when we eventually hit 15K subscribers, which is a ridiculously high number for what we do. But anyway, we're giving away 10 CDs to some lucky metalhead out there. All you have to do is comment on the video linked down below or go to our channel. It's playing automatically. As soon as we hit the mark, I'm going to do a comment randomizer and pick a winner and announce it, and probably profusely thank you, because that's what we do at the end of these videos. But I'm going to thank the living fuck out of you after 15K, because wow, that is kind of beyond any expectations I've ever had for this channel. I know we say a lot of the same thank you shit at the end of videos, but I mean it. Like, it's amazing doing this. It's amazing to get the response we have. And I'm going to keep doing all these awkward thank yous, because you guys fucking rule. And yeah, we look forward to loading you guys with more content and all that crazy shit. So once again, thank you all, and we will catch you later.